Okay, welcome back. We're now on page 710 talking about the fact that a single try could have multiple catches. You could have, if it's the file not found, if it's the bad input, is it the whatever. You could just layer these things. So because you might have to handle, if it's file not found, well then that's radically different than, disk full, right? So the file not found means, I'm sorry, dude, you made a mistake. You need to try again. But file, permission denied or disk full, those are completely different things. And you don't want to say, oh, try again, right? There's something else wrong. So if there's something else wrong, you need to be specific to the user, telling them what's going on. So it kind of makes sense sometimes to have multiple catch blocks. Okay, there's a code listing 11.5. It starts on page 710, goes to 712. I'm not going to go through it, but you can look at it. They use a file not found and an input mismatch. Okay, they're trying to read something, and so either if the problem is the file's not found, then obviously the solution is radically different than something else. Okay, so if I ask you on a test question, can I have multiple catches? The answer would be, well, sure. Now, do they need to be in any particular order? Ooh, okay. This is complicated. Let's go back to this guy here. If I was to say file not found and EOF exception, no trouble at all. But if I was to say file not found and then IO exception, okay, what happens is as the exception has occurred, it's going to try to find the most correct exception handling catch block, okay? So it's the first one that it fits. Well, if you put exception at the top of the list, it'll never look any further, right? It'll always just use the first one. So if I had both exception, IO exception, and file not found, I had all three of those, it's going to have to be in the exact opposite order as they appear here. Otherwise, exception will never ever work. Exception would always work, and these guys would never be found. So it would have to be file not found would be the first one, followed by IO exception being the second one, followed by the catch-all exception one, because everything will match that, okay? So that kind of makes sense. So yes, you can have multiple ones, but you kind of have to pay attention to what order they appear in. Okay. Moving along on page 718, there's a thing called a finally clause. So let's go back to our example. Okay. So in addition to doing, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and put this one back. It's kind of silly, but too bad. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put that guy back. Whoops. Okay. So here's the old way of doing it. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to put in a finally block. Finally. Now the cool thing about a finally block is it always runs no matter what. Okay? If there's an error, the finally block will run. If there's not an error, the finally block will run. So it doesn't matter. Okay? So I'm going to go here and say system dot. I'm going to use system out here. There's a reason. Just bear with me. Print ln hello from finally. Okay, cool. And I'm going to change this to an out just to say. Okay, so if there is no error, I'm going to get that print line and that print line. If there is an error, I'm going to get this print line and that print line. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Let's go through this. So I say, I don't know, XYZ, whatever. And then I get boom and the finally one. Okay, cool. I'm going to start mine over again. Run it again. And this time I'm going to enter a valid number. And I still get the finally. Okay? So you might think, remember how this thing jumps out of order and then there's no way to get back? But there is kind of sort of a way to get sort of back. It's the finally block. The finally block. Now, let me give you a very, very good example of when that would come in really, really handy. Okay. let's say that that I'm getting ready to read a file, and I want to make sure that I don't accidentally leave the file open. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go down to here, and okay, so oops, let me look at my cheat sheet really quick. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to create another scanner. Okay, I'm going to do a scanner called, I don't know, I'm going to call mine FR. Just hang on a second, I'll explain what all this stuff means. I'm going to go ahead and just do it like this for the time being. And then I want to do a try block that says, hey, I'm getting ready to open this file. So file, file F is equal to new file, some file that doesn't exist. Okay, so I'm opening, I've got a file here, and now I want to open the file. So I'm going to do FR is equal to new scanner F, like this. Oh, of course. Hang on a second, just a minute. Okay. Oh, okay. And then I'm going to do the catch block. And this time I'm going to do the polymorphic one because I don't really care. Exception EX. Just to make the red squigglies go away. Okay. So I've opened the file, except this case I know darn well I haven't opened the file. That's beside the point. So I'm opening the file, and then I want to do a while statement to read these guys. Remember how this thing works? Where I say while FR, has next. You guys remember this, right? This is not that long ago. And then I want to read the thing, like just system.out.println, and then do FR next line. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to put down here, I want to put FR close, I want to put a finally block. Sorry. The whole point of this was the finally block. And it's kind of sad that I forgot that, huh? Here's where I want to say FR close. Okay? I want to close this guy. All right. So some sort of an error message here, right? System.err. println, couldn't open the file, whatever. Something went wrong. Obviously, in the real world, you wouldn't make it quite so terse, but that's beside the point. Okay, now, for this to work, I'm going to have to make some minor tweaks to it, because I want to be able to always close the file. But sometimes the error might be here, or in here. So in other words, it could be that the file was actually opened, or it's possible the file was never opened. So I need to go in here and first of all, make this one red squiggly down here. I got a red squiggly that says, hey man, that variable might not have been initialized. So I go here and I make this equal to null to start with. Okay, cool. Now, that's not all good. In fact, I'm going to run this just to show you what I'm talking about. You might think, okay, you did a good job. Let's keep going. Well, all right, let's try it. So my age is 42, and my age is 42, and boom! I got the something is wrong, and then I got an exception that killed my application. So stop. Are you telling me that I can throw an exception inside an exception handler? I don't get a pass? That's exactly what I'm saying. You can have an exception occur inside your catch or inside your finally. Yeah. So, man, when you're writing those sections, you really need to be paying attention. What happened here is this thing didn't exist yet. So I need to have an if statement that says, if FR not equal to null, that's what I need to do. Okay, now this is what people call the file open pattern. Okay, this is kind of sort of something that you ought to get familiar with, because every single time you open a file for reading or writing, you really ought to be using this pattern. So I'm going to scroll back a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Well, maybe you can't see the whole thing. Hang on a second. Okay, now you can see the whole thing. It's got several parts. I have to create the scanner up here at this indentation level. Is that right? Because I'm creating it here, and then I need to talk to it here, so I cannot create it at line 57. It has to be up here at a different indentation level so that the scope is in here. Remember, these are curly braces. You know, anything created in here is not visible down here, right? Okay, just like any other scope. So I have to create my variable up front. I have to give it a bogus value to start with. And then I do my test. And there could be any number of things wrong. One of them, in this particular case, it was a file not found. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be other things. And then my exception. And then my finally, where I check to see if it was open. And if it was open, I close it. Now this is a classic example of how to use a try, catch, finally for opening files. If you ever have to open a file writing any programming language, you're going to need to know this pattern. So now that you know. Okay. All right. So let's talk about displaying messages and where you should and should not. I'm gonna take a small detour here and talk about the three-tiered application. This is typically a conversation we have in the software engineering class or one of the advanced classes, so don't get too bogged down about this. But I'm not going to ask you what is the user service layer, that kind of stuff. So basically, you could write an application in 3 layers. One layer, it only talks to the user, and that's the user service layer. And then the other one is where all the guts, that's where all the work gets done, right? Whatever the actual thing, you're writing a calculator. The calculator happens in the middle layer. And if you wanted to store something, which almost all applications do, they store something, then you would have a data access layer. We don't have one of those in our case. So let's say I had an employee class in here. So that's how it would work. Now, you could, now I'm not saying you have to do this, okay, for every application that you write, but you could have it so that the user service layer is the only one that talks to the user, and the business logic layer doesn't talk to the user at all, okay? You could do it that way. All right. Now, having said that, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to include a brand new, we're going to use an employee class here. Okay. So I'm going to go to here and grab my employee guy and just drag, oh, you know what? I think I have to expand this before I can drag and drop him. Okay, let's try that now. So I'm going to grab an employee guy and drop him into here. Okay, cool. I now have an employee guy. So let's go look at him and make this now Chapter 11. Cool. So it's a typical employee kind of thing where I've got some min hours and min rates, and I've got a department, and I've got a constructor with the auto incrementing, ID, and I'm setting these things, I'm washing these things through the setters, and here's all the setters and getters, and here's all my system error println guys, okay? I must have made a mistake somewhere. PFB, oh, it's not a string, it's a department type, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I guess I should see if this thing compiles, huh? Let me just hit the compile button. I can't remember if I left any junk out there or not. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so before we get into this too much deeper, we'll stop and go to another video.